Mominatrix here. Welcome back to Mominatrix Mondays. Today I wanted to talk to you about something that's a little bit more esoteric than our previous topics of conversation, something psychological. So, some of you may be familiar with the concept of the particular headspace that your mythical beast will go to during training, if training is going successfully. What you might not be familiar with is how that space affects them in the long term, psychologically, how to come back from that space, and also that there is a counter space for trainers as well on the other side. So I want to talk about those things today, the headspace that we get into when we're training our mythical beasts. If you're not familiar with the concept, the experience of being trained, the experience of that level of pain and submission on behalf of your mythical beast will take them to an altered psychological state, an altered headspace. And in that headspace, they are more submissive, more supplicant, more willing to do what you want them to do in training. And it can be very dangerous because when your mythical beast goes to that space, it's possible to take them someplace that they're not otherwise normally ready to go, and that isn't in fact beneficial to their training. It's important to establish boundaries and barriers ahead of time, and to remember to respect those boundaries, what is and is not off limits for training time, the kind of training that your beast expects when you're going to do your training. Otherwise, it's possible that they might feel compelled, either from being in that space or from just your force of personality as a trainer, to exceed those boundaries and exceed those limits and exceed what they're comfortable with and ultimately do damage to themselves psychologically. The second point that I want to bring up is talking about the long-term effects. Now, it's very important after you train your mythical beast, after you've completed a training session, that you help them heal, help them remedy, especially if they go to that altered headspace. When they come back from that, your mythical beast is very likely to feel insecure, anxious, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of self-loathing and self-deprecating feelings. It's really easy for that negative self-talk and those darker mental impulses to creep their way in. Many mythical beasts that, if not given proper aftercare after a training session, can go to places as dark as suicidal ideation or self-harm, which might seem not as important given the context of training and how much harm they endure in training, but you have to remember that that is an environment in which you control the level of training that they're going through. When they try to train themselves and harm themselves, that's problematic. It's important in the aftermath of a training session to take care of the psychological welfare of your beast, to reassure them that they are worthy, that they are good beasts, that they are valid and respectable and respected, that they are cared for, that you didn't do the things that you did. You didn't put them through the training paces that you put them through because you think less of them, but because in fact you think more of them. You put them through that because you care about them, because it's a special bond that you have with your beast, and it's not just something that can be found in other places. It's also important to discuss ahead of time in the, what your mythical beast expects in terms of that aftercare. Some mythical beasts want a certain beverage prepared for them, usually something warm like coffee or tea or hot cocoa. Some mythical beasts want to have a particular item of clothing to wear or a particular environment that they need to be in, a certain sound, a certain level of lighting, certain smells. It's important to know these things ahead of time so you can properly care for the psychological well-being of your mythical beast after a training session. The other thing to keep in mind that's very important is that we as trainers have our own altered headspace that we can get into. I have experienced this firsthand myself, this altered trainer headspace, where on its own is not terribly problematic, but it opens you up to a lot more possibilities, a lot more options for training than you would normally be comfortable with. Perhaps things that your mythical beast wants that you would not otherwise be willing to train them in. And most importantly, when you come back from that, it's very easy to feel like a monster. It's very easy to feel like you are absolutely a terrible person for the kind of training that you put these beasts through. Because we have to do hard things. We have to do difficult things as trainers, sometimes things that are emotionally dangerous. We have to take your beast to places that few dare to tread. And trainers have to be aware of that. And you have to be aware that when you come back from that space, you're going to feel bad about yourself. One example that I like to use, if I have an agenda of how training is going to go that day, if I have a game plan of how I want training to be conducted, and I enter into that headspace, and I deviate from that training agenda, I deviate from that plan, particularly if I deviate from that plan in ways that are more extreme, more dangerous, more questionable methodologies of training, then when I come back from that, I am going to feel like a serial killer. I'm going to feel like some kind of terrible, monstrous creature that just shouldn't be alive, that shouldn't be allowed to train beasts, and certainly shouldn't be allowed to have relationships with society and other people. It's just like, oh, well, I guess it's time to just lock myself in the closet until I die. And so it's important to also be aware of what you need in terms of aftercare as a trainer. And sometimes you'll need reassurances from your mythical beast that you're a good person, that they respect you, and that they do what you want, not because they're afraid of you, but because they love you and they care about you and they respect you as a person, as their trainer. Trainers that don't get this reassurance will often fall into the trap of really believing that they are that kind of monster, and that can lead you either into very dangerous paths of self-harm, just like the altered headspace for mythical beasts, or it can lead you down to pathways of greater and greater, more extreme levels of training that can ultimately be dangerous not only to your sanity as a trainer, but the sanity of your mythical beast and your own physical health and your beast's physical health. That's what I wanted to talk to you about today, guys. Let's make sure that we are taking care of ourselves as trainers. Let's make sure that we're taking care of our beasts after our training session. And let's make sure that we know what everybody in a training session needs before we enter into that session, so we can make sure that everybody's taken care of and being treated with the respect that they deserve and being validated and reaffirmed in their self-worth after a session. Because being a mythical beast, being trained by you, does not make them less awe-inspiring as a creature. A unicorn is still a unicorn even after you have run it several laps. A dragon is still a dragon even if you had to systematically pull off all the scales from its belly. A troll is still a troll even if you taunted it with a goat that it couldn't have for 6 hours. Mythical beasts are still inspiring and impressive creatures, whether we're training them or not. And if you train them and then treat them like they're garbage afterwards, they're not going to want to be continuing to train with you. All right, guys, that's all I have to say about that for today. Thank you. Have a great day.